Without further ado, I would like to get right into it and welcome our first author. We are going to be introducing you to Rachelle Rasolofo-Czerwinki. Rachelle was born in Madagascar, partly raised in France, married a German Canadian, and followed his international career with the United Nations through 6 countries over 20 years. They have 2 sons and live in Vancouver, British Columbia. Rachelle's astonishing book, The Life That's Chosen Me, describes the journey of an extraordinary family in Russia from 2003 to 2005. It's a vivid account, at times poignant, at times hilarious, of life in post-perestroika Russia, narrated by a mother originally from Madagascar with an international civil servant Canadian husband and their 2 sons, one of them with severe disabilities. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our first author, Rachelle.
Hello, everyone. So I'm really pleased to be here. And thank you, Jonah, and the Vancouver Public Library and the whole team. So my reading today is an excerpt from my book, The Life That's Chosen Me. And it's the last chapter, and it's called Airports. Airports. During our 2-year stay in Russia, we spent quite a bit of time at airports, flying to Vancouver once or twice a year for the summer and Christmas holidays. Things always happened at airports, always challenging, especially whenever we traveled with Nicholas. For example, taking him to the bathroom always required creativity because airplane washrooms were not made for 2 people. And we had to be 2 people. So the crew would hold a blanket in front of the door because we could not close the washroom door. Then there was a time when Chris and I were on a flight from Moscow to Copenhagen. We were seated behind a young Russian man who had brought his own bottle of vodka and was drinking from it every 5 minutes. Finally, the flight attendant told him it was against the rules and he should stop and put the bottle away. He just kept drinking, as if he did not hear a word. After a while, she came back and told him sternly that if he did not put the bottle away, she would have to tell the captain and confiscate it. He just kept drinking. The flight attendant came back, this time with the captain, who told him that unless he gave up his bottle immediately, he would notify the police. The young Russian stared at the window and kept drinking. As we were landing, we heard siren approaching the airport. Approaching the plane. We watched as uniformed men rushed toward the plane and swiftly pulled him from his seat. He was still clutching his bottle. See what happens when you don't control your drinking, I said to my husband. Then there was a time when Mike, Nicholas, and I flew from Moscow to Frankfurt on our way to Vancouver. We were to board a Lufthansa flight in Frankfurt and had booked special assistance for Nicholas. So they allowed us to board first. When we were about to sit in our assigned seats, one of the crew members asked us to sit in another place, closer to the washrooms. They said it would be easier for us. It will be easier for Nicholas, the crew member said with a smile. We will sit whoever is supposed to sit here, somewhere else. I am sure they will understand. We sat where we were asked to sit. The plane was slowly filling up. A couple walked toward us and looked up at the seat number. Yeah, the man muttered with a heavy German accent. 12C and 12D. These are our seats. I know, I said, while looking around for a crew member. We were asked to sit here. These are our seats, the man bellowed, gesturing for us to get up. Davai, auf. He was shouting now, and people were beginning to stare. Mike pulled my hand. Mom, let's move. Finally, a flight attendant came over and tried to explain in German why we were seated in their seats. We will give you other seats, better ones, over there. Nein, auf! The German man wanted none of it. These were his seats, and he wanted them and nothing else. The crew member became impatient and moved us to some other seats while muttering under his breath. These Germans, so rude. I said it was okay, we didn't mind. Later on, after the plane took off, the same crew member came over and said with a wry smile, don't worry, it's a long flight. They will suffer. British Airways and Lufthansa were usually quite good, with special waiting areas for people needing assistance. In Heathrow, the waiting area was aptly called Serenity Lounge. Their crew members were also generally very helpful. Amongst all the airports we came to know, Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow was the absolute worst. In early January 2004, Nick and I were returning to Moscow from our Christmas holiday in Vancouver. Usually, Chris would leave earlier to return to work and leave me and the boys to enjoy a longer holiday. This time, Michael decided to travel with his dad, leaving Nicholas and me to travel home together. I was getting used to the long flights, even though looking after a young adult with severe disabilities was always a challenge. We had to be extra organized and book for special assistance and a wheelchair on arrival. An airport attendant pushing a wheelchair was waiting for us at the Sheremetyevo airport. Nicholas sat in it, and off we went to go through customs and passport check. The security booths were one floor down, so the wheelchair attendant led us to the nearest elevator. His English was basic, as was my Russian. He closed the elevator door and pressed the button to go down. Nothing happened. He pressed again. Nothing. Let's open the door and try again, I said. The door did not open. We tried various buttons for 15 minutes. Down button, open button, alarm button, nothing. I banged on the glass door to attract someone's attention. Nothing. People were briskly walking by, glancing at their watches. After half an hour inside the elevator, it was starting to feel quite warm. I took off Nick's coat and mine. We pushed the down button again, the open door button again. Nothing. I banged at the door, this time really loudly because I had spotted a lady in uniform coming toward the elevator. She stopped at the door. We are stuck. Can you help us? I shouted. She pressed the open door button, but nothing happened. Okay, I'm going to get some help, she said. I felt deep relief and started to put Nick's coat back on. We waited another 15 minutes. The lady did not come back. I took Nick's coat off again, feeling hopeless. The confined place reeked of vodka. Our attendant had obviously been drinking before his shift. I was sweating and started to feel sick. The woman may have forgotten us, or she might have told someone who never bothered to come. I asked the attendant to bang on the door again, as loudly as he could. Eventually, another woman in uniform came by. Please open the door for us. We are stuck, I shouted. She looked at us and shrugged her shoulders. Sorry, this is not my department. I was mystified. So whose department is it, please? I don't know. Sorry, I can't help you. And she was gone. Vive le communisme. I could have hit her. I felt so tired of the 10-hour flight, tired of this bloody mess of a country, tired of this smelly gentleman, and tired of being solely responsible for Nicolas' well-being. We banged at the door again, this time together. A gentleman stopped. Are you in trouble? Can I help? He sounded American. I asked him to phone my husband and let him know that we were stuck and to please get some help for us. He also tried to open the door, but could not. He promised to do his best. I felt like lying on the floor. I wanted to cry. We had just had a 10-hour-long flight and have now been over 2 hours at the airport, stuck in this elevator. Nicolas did not have dinner and I was about to lose it and scream. This was too much for my nerves. I stood in the corner of the elevator, not knowing what to do next. I saw our attendant gesturing to a woman. She stopped at the elevator. He said something in Russian. She shook the door lightly, pressed the button, and the door opened. She came inside and pressed the down button, and down we went. Fruit! I could not believe it. I took Nicolas through the security check in a stupor, collected our luggage, and arrived home about 1 hour later. Chris was watching television, his favorite hockey game. I felt like hitting him. Nick had to be fed and put to bed. After he was tucked in bed, I lay in my own bed, repeating to myself, can't do this for much longer. Can't do this for much longer. I can't do this for much longer. Defeated, I thought how different my life would have been among hibiscus in Indonesia, because that was the other choice, Indonesia or Russia. In the summer of 2005, Mike was getting ready for his high school graduation. His prom night was special. Together with 3 other friends, he rented a deluxe limousine. They did not want to be outdone by the kids of those Russian billionaire oligarchs. Something strange happened the day following his prom night. Saeed, our family driver, came in the morning as usual to collect the car keys and warm up the car. He came back 15 minutes later, a perplexed look on his usually jovial face. I don't understand. The car is not parked at its usual place. Plus, it has no gas in the tank. I'm pretty sure the tank was full yesterday. After some investigation, it appeared that Mike had taken the family car for a spin around the city without a driving license, and by pure chance, managed to bring it back without a scratch, almost without a scratch, just a few feet away from where it was originally parked. He graduated in May 2005 with his international baccalaureate in his pocket, applied, and was accepted into the University of British Columbia, Vancouver. Mike was ready for the next stage of his life. He was getting wary of Moscow's overt racism. While on a school trip to St. Petersburg, he went to a nightclub with his class and was refused entry in the name of face control. This is a process where the security guy at the entrance of any establishment could refuse entry to anyone just by the person's appearance. The class stood in solidarity with Mike, and they all left to go to a different place. With Mike finishing high school, this meant I had to take some difficult decisions. After some deliberation, I told Chris it would be best if I moved back to Vancouver with the kids. I could not see how I was going to manage between a rebellious 18-year-old in first year university, a 17-year-old who was nonverbal, could not walk or eat on his own, and a husband based in Russia. It was simply too many challenges for me to handle. I knew deep inside my heart that I could not continue to live the life I had been leading for the past 20 years. For the first time in our nomadic life, I had decided where I wanted to go. In the past, I had always been good at making the best of following Chris and his career post and creating a life for us in each location. I enjoyed making us a home in each country and even moving furniture around. Each house was very different, so turning a house into a home called on my creativity and my inner interior designer. But this time, I was not following Chris. I chose to stay in Vancouver with our kids. It felt so new and strange because I had never done that before. I longed for Vancouver to live in the apartment we bought 2 years ago. We only stayed there 6 weeks every year. I needed to put down roots. I no longer had the physical and emotional strength to meet the constant stress and challenges of moving from country to country, especially with a disabled child. We left as a family of 4 in July of 2005, knowing that Chris would return to Moscow on his own. It was the end of an era. We had been traveling around the world for 2 decades, 2 years in Mali, West Africa, 2 years in Djibouti, East Africa, 5 years in Rome, Italy, 4 years in Beijing, China, 5 years in Cairo, Egypt, 2 years in Moscow, Russia. Now, the 2 boys and I would be finally settling down in Vancouver, Canada, the place where I had landed 21 years before. It was the end of a long period of my life. I had traveled extensively, had sat next to ambassadors and heads of state, and met people from all over the world. Now I was preparing to leave this life behind me and embark on a new adventure in Canada. Chris went back to Moscow in August. He was not quite alone, as our family dog Shona was waiting eagerly for him to return. I had also arranged for Sonia, an immigrant woman from Tajikistan, to come twice a week for house cleaning. I organized our new life in Canada as permanent residents rather than vacationers. Chris and I settled into a type of long-distance relationship, making it work by traveling back and forth between Moscow and Vancouver a few times that year. This still required much time and effort, but I felt relieved that at last we were going to stay somewhere for good. And I also felt fortunate that we chose Canada as our country of residence. One good thing about our Russian stay was that it made settling down in Canada seem like a breeze, so organized, so logical. Yet I had to organize Nicola's schooling and care, but for the first time in our lives, we were dealing with professionals, social workers, teachers, and doctors. Whereas in all those other countries, I kind of had to be everything: a manager, TVT coordinator, and trainer. In the summer of 2006, Chris was sent to Darfur, Sudan. I traveled to Moscow one last time to organize the shipment of our personal effects and to close the house. I sold some items, donated others, and discarded much. We hesitated about bringing Shona to Canada, and I began to look for a new home for her. We placed an ad in the Moscow Times, and a newly arrived American family was willing to take her. They came to our house a few times to meet Shona. Then we left her at their place for a weekend. They returned her the following day, saying she was just too miserable and missed being with us. So we decided to bring her with us to Canada. Sonia, the cleaning lady, asked me what I was planning to do with Shona. I think we are going to take her with us, I said. Isn't it complicated, though? She asked, with papers and a plane ticket. No, it's not that complicated, I replied. She just needs some vaccinations, and a plane ticket costs $300. It's much cheaper than ours. She fell silent, her head leaning on the vacuum cleaner. Sonia? She let out a long, heavy sigh. As she lifted her head up, she said, I so wish I was a dog. After Shona arrived in Vancouver and was cleared through customs, her first action on Canadian soil was to relieve herself, thus marking a new territory. Then she ran on the green Canadian grass outside the Vancouver International Airport. I still remember Sonia from time to time, the Tajik woman who so wished she was a dog in order to come to Canada. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Michelle. What a wonderful story. It was a real honest look into what your experience has been like. It sounds like your family has had a lot of adventures across the world. And yes, we are seeing in the chat that people are clapping. So thank you so much for that reading. Is there any questions from our audience or from any other panelists about the reading, about Rachelle's experience? I'll give it a couple of seconds to see if anybody has anything to say. I did have a question. I was curious about, did you have a network of friends or family in Vancouver when you made that hard decision to come all the way back to Vancouver and leave Chris in Moscow?
Yeah, my parents-in-law were living in Vancouver. And so as I mentioned, we would come back to Vancouver. Chris was from Vancouver. His family lived in Vancouver. So we lucky for us, we had a network of family and friends in Vancouver, but we never lived in Vancouver for more than 6 weeks.
Wow. That must have been very difficult for Nicholas to process, going back and forth and all of the travel and such. Like that's a long flight. 12 hours is that's a long flight to go through. So thank you so much for that look into your life. We really enjoyed it. We will have an opportunity to ask more questions at the end. So if you've got a burning question, feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end of the program, or you can, of course, ask the question later on in the program. So now I would like to introduce you to our next author. Jennie Chantal Dugay's poetry and creative nonfiction has appeared in ARC, Prism, Vallum, Contemporary Verse 2, Plentitude, the Capilano Review, the anthology Against Death, and more. Jennie lives in Vancouver on land that is unceded by the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam people. Jennie writes to past and future selves to clarify, uncover, confront, apologize, and find reassurance that it is possible to recover or get better in a world that insists on ableist interpretations of what it means to be well. In their poetry and nonfiction, Jennie attempts to make sense of childhood mental illness and how that child's relationship to God, sin, and a queer body-mind continue to influence their self-perception and ways of being. Jennie writes towards life, towards being alive and living in a body disabled by chronic pain, the gender binary, and ableism. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jennie to our virtual stage.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be reading a creative nonfiction essay for you, and then a few poems after that. And it's about 15 minutes or so altogether. So the essay is called In My Head, A Resurrection Story, and it was published in 2019 in the anthology Against Death. This one right here. So I'll just get started. There is a difference between rebirth and resurrection. With rebirth, we make a choice to be born again. We start a new life, cleansed and whole. With resurrection, we come back from the dead, wounded and estranged, to resume the lives we left. I wasn't reborn, I was resurrected. The room constricts, the ceiling drops. I lie on the bed and I cannot move. My eyes meet a corner of the ceiling and fixate. I leave my body. I leave the pain and the fear of what the pain is doing to me. There is no sound, temperature, or sensation, only the calm of inertia. I don't know how much time passes before I get up, wash my face, and resume the daily work of pushing against the invisible force that is slowly encompassing so much of my life. It's in your head, the blotches of white on the MRI, my surprise, the bafflement of neurologists, their reckoning that maybe in 100 years they will have answers. For 15 years, it's in your head has meant dismissal and scorn. I am used to medical professionals treating me like a fraud, refusing treatment, but I am done with weeping. Instead, I wrestle to understand the physiology of this essential organ, floating like a wounded bird in the cage of my skull. It's in my head, and yet it is my body that feels a terrible intimacy with pain. My body is not my body. I refuse this body, refuse to be in this body, refuse to accept the illness this body carries. What I refuse claims me, even as I push against it, all fists and teeth in my effort to cure. The yard is covered in morning glory. It chokes everything it touches. The laurel hedge, the lilac tree, the lawn. Do you know that every time you cut a piece, it comes back? It is the way of vines. I know this, and yet I pull at it, desperately rip it from the bushes in handfuls, tear it from the grass. Little pieces swarm around me like bees. It is a focused madness, interrupted only when searing pain sends me weak and shaking to my bed. I promise my body I will stop, but I can't give up. I have to get all the morning glory out of the yard if anything else is ever going to grow. I fill bag after bag. No matter what I do, it comes back. There was no emergency, no sudden trauma. No doctors brought me back from the brink or gave me 3 months to live. There was no tunnel, no bright light, not even a broken bone, not even a bruise. Death took its time with me. So did resurrection. There was no gasping breath, no sudden hunger. My fist did not break through the wood of my coffin to spray dirt from my grave. For 3 years, I wrote my body into story, gave it shape and weight, my words searching for an exit to what felt like endless mourning. I remember the first year through a haze of medication, nervous breakdown, and the devotion of a person who would not leave me. I was infected with grief. Illness had won. I would never recover. In the second year, months of recounting over 2 decades of chronic mental and physical illness led to the realization that I had been ill nearly all my life, that my losses and griefs seemed to have no real beginning or end. Like waves slowly eroding the shore of my body, death came for me, turned my bones to sand. Somewhere in the third year, I was resurrected. It hurts to come back to life. Disabling, invisible chronic illness has its own logic, its own mathematics, dictionaries, and theories. It inhabits its own dimension, a parallel world where the agreements of the 24-hour day and the 7-day week only come into play for appointments, medication times, and trips to the grocery store or the pharmacy. My resurrection opened a portal to this world where everything looks the same. My body, my scars, my hands held out before me. But when I look up, I see all my little deaths cast out like constellations, every loss condensed into memory, my stories, bright, fixed, and out of focus. I spin on my axis. From here, my past stretches out like a rocky shore, every memory of survival the shape of a stone, and every stone a story I must tell, eventually, or at least a name I must speak. It's in my head, ableism, the blotches of white, ingrained, years of denial, the pressure of inhabiting a sick body in a world that does not tolerate chronic illness. Resurrected, I feel such tenderness for that stubborn person, so afraid of the truth of their body. I imagine my brain, not a wounded bird, but a vine, resilient and adaptable, pushing against death. For 7 months, I walk every day to the park near my house to sit on the mossy roots of a big leaf maple. Some days, I imagine its trunk conforming to my body until I feel like a child, safe in the embrace of a loving ancestor. Other days, I imagine a throne and myself a witch. I close my eyes and feel the transformation. Frozen to frazzle, slush to steam, vapor to cloud. There is only sound, temperature, sensation. All fall and winter, I practice feeling alive in my body, practice stirring and trembling like spring awakening under a shroud of soil and snow. My body has accepted all my apologies. When I press my lips to the soft flesh in the crook of my elbow and feel the melt of meeting my body, I am excited as a new lover. How do you like to be touched? I slide my fingers up and down my limbs, feel the hair lift, the goose flesh bump. Resurrected, I learn my body of pain can feel pleasure, a gust of wind that picks hair up off the head and tosses it around, a breeze shivering up a pant leg, water trickling down skin, hands cupping the base of my skull, touch that doesn't want or need anything from me. I take to wearing ankle socks, sitting on benches in the rain, my face tilted up, reverent. Illness is the physical place where I live. Here, rest is work, and work is symptom management, and I don't have to produce to consume or to be deserving of care. People want to do things for me, my dishes, my laundry, my groceries. They like to do things for me. The modes of production that sustain me are also the skills I must learn and teach, receive, offer, ask, decline. I feel the gravity of this world pushing my body into a shape made for survival. Sick, ill, disabled, crip, weak, broken, and liberating my mind from the shame and guilt I feel about how much care I need to survive. It recalibrates my days and movements into units of rest and energy, orienting me to a world where force does not create movement and movement is not necessary for change. Ableism is why we say to ourselves and each other, stay strong, no pain, no gain, mind over matter, don't give up. It's why we see illness as something to fight until it goes away and death as preferable to disability. I know death is not finished with me. My chronic illnesses are too unpredictable, too ravenous, but resurrection shows me how to keep living with a body I know will not be healed. I must give up again and again any story that binds my worth to my productivity, erases my claim to pleasure and connection, denies my right to be here, sick, disabled, and alive. My power inherent not in what I can do, but in who I am. Resurrection can only bring me back to life. It can't keep me alive. It's in my head. I turn myself around and around, shake all my limbs. I twist and contort myself until the belief that I am unworthy drips out like dirty water from an old rag, until words bounce into an alphabet at my feet, just letters. I reach out my hand. My body reaches out too. We pick the bright blue flowers of the morning glory, rub the soft petals on our cheeks, place them on our fingers like little hats. We lie down, resurrection between us like a covenant. When the stars appear, we point at constellations and remember how we died and what illness has taken from us. Under our bodies, we feel the earth, gravity grounding us into our stories of survival. The vines dominate our landscape, turning ruins into rolling hills, its leaves shaped like hearts. That's the essay. Just give me a second here. So I'll finish off with a few poems. The first one is called Hide and Seek. 1. The absence of your voice in a room full of tongues God has touched. Memories of yourself as a child in a church basement wrapped in velvet curtains. Your magical thinking, if I can't see, I can't be seen. The parents take turns fainting. When they wake up, you get a cookie. 2. God is always watching, they say. He has a plan. Anxiety marks the strain of your smile where the child tore away. Everything about you is clench, and grind. Dissociation, a shadow you pull closer to hide from all your sins. Lust, pride, envy, hardened into burning knots, bright proofs of where God sought your body and your body and your body, but you would not be found. 3. The child sits beside you now, so young and gay. Little one, there is no such thing as sin, no plan you cannot refuse. It's safe with me to speak the proof of who you are. You have never been a girl. It's so obvious now, and you are not a boy. Your tongue is still yours, your body. Decades collapse like curtains dropping. You can see me, says the child. Yes, hallelujah, I can see you. This next poem is called Exculpation, and it begins with a quote from the poet Kathleen McKeever. When sin has been eaten, what is left? Let go, said every full moon you woke under, all your tarot cards, recurring dreams of losing teeth and control of vehicles. Omens, the slow death of all your succulents, threats of flooding, friendships lost to things you still don't understand. Who taught you to find meaning in suffering instead of survival? Did God promise if you prayed away the sick and the gay, you would love yourself without question? When sin has been eaten, what is left of shame but memory? Your body's shy movements, acts of desperate love in the throes of an amazing grace. This one is called A Spell for Planting Evidence. Smash every window, plate, glass, jar, every bottle, lick shards off the table, counter, floor, out of the pan, the pot, the bowl, eat knives from pointed fingers like sweets, slit diagnosis into skin, slice open your spine, remove at the roots every nerve like a seed, plant the seeds by the river on the night of a new moon. This is how you prove it. Create for every grief, for every loss, a scar they can see and touch and feel for themselves. The last one I'm going to read is called All Living Things. Solomon's seal, bleeding heart, toad lilies, your identification with what rests months every year, perfectly comfortable in a messy bed. Inside, ceramic pots of cactus, aloe, and orchid acclimate to unnatural light. Green onions sprouting in a jar, forced into perpetuity, was never your thing. You think it's foolish to expect constant growth after all the desperate years you spent growing fluent in the language of request and recipients, patience for the relentless needs of persistent illness, presence in this very moment, and care for what interrupts it. Your body, oh yes, always in pain, but you see now in solidarity too. All around you, there is evidence of life if you look. A small world is still a world made for growth and the perennial laws of rest and arousal that bind all living things, even you, to life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was absolutely beautiful. I just wanted to comment that the tonality of your voice was just so beautiful to listen to. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I saw a lot of themes throughout the course of your writing of sort of life and rebirth, and bringing it back. Your last poem, the connection to sort of the first reading you did with the morning glories. So thank you for a really wonderful reading. If anyone in the audience, you're getting a lot of chatter, a lot of people applauding and saying thank you, haunting. So do have a look at all of those. And if anyone has any questions for Jenny at this point, now would be a good time to ask them. You could also wait till the end of the program and ask in the Q&A session. I'll just give it a minute. And as someone who has done some gardening, morning glories are particularly difficult to get rid of. So I can understand that metaphor greatly. Wonderful. Okay, I think we will. Gus says, "Oh my God, I can't believe you wrote that yourself, Auntie Jenny." Wonderful. Kelly has asked, where can I see this writing of yours? And a little later in the program, I'll actually be posting a link to the anthology that piece that Jenny first read was written. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. So I think it is now time to move on to our third and final author for today. I would like you all to meet Keiko Honda. Keiko Honda is a scientist, writer, community organizer, and painter. She holds a PhD in international community health from New York University, but when she suddenly contracted a rare autoimmune disease that confined her to a wheelchair for life, she had to leave her career in research at Columbia University in New York. After moving to Vancouver in 2009, Keiko started hosting artist salons, for which she was awarded the City of Vancouver's Remarkable Women Award in 2014. Shortly thereafter, she founded the Vancouver Arts Colloquium Society to bridge generations and cultures through the arts and to offer members of marginalized communities in Vancouver opportunities for artistic self-discovery. She teaches the aesthetics of co-creation in the liberal arts and 55+ program at Simon Fraser University, and she lives in Vancouver and enjoys watercolor painting and hosting her salons. She is the author of Accidental Blooms, which was published by Caitlin Press in 2023. Without further ado, I would like for you to meet Keiko and prepare yourself for a beautiful reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonah, for kind introduction. Hello, everybody. Before I read, I'd like to give you a little bit of a context for the part that I'm going to read. When I was working as a research scientist in the field of cancer epidemiology, I was acutely aware of how social support network impact on our cancer outcomes and overall health. But at that time, my understanding was limited to the way scholars and researchers construct and conceptualize them. But when I got paralyzed and got into wheelchair at age 40, I gained first-hand experience with social support network, essentially conducting deeply personal research. So the section that I'm going to read is called the preschool, and this section captures my what it means to have a social support network and capture my first time sort of a sense of community and the moment of co-creation. Okay, so preschool. I met Leslie Nang Haberman for the first time during my preschool admission interview at the Montessori Preschool Family School West in Midtown Manhattan. I was seeking to arrange Maya's post-Barnard preschool and had sent applications to 4 or 5 schools. Dan, Maya, and I went to the parents-child interview at Family School West together, and I was nervous, as if I were applying to university. I was definitely a first-time parent. At the beginning of the interview, Leslie noticed my wheelchair and asked what happened to me. It was rather abrupt, but not obtrusive. I sensed a compassion in her that hard to put into words. Once I answered, she shared with me her own health condition and associated pain as if I were her close friend. The following day, I received an email from Leslie. You glided through the room like a gazelle. You are a courageous young woman, and I know that one day you will be able to do all the things you wish to do. The love you spread, just by being yourself, will help you to overcome all the obstacles now in your path. I was incredibly moved. Her email was not only unexpected and touching, but also confirmed my daughter's admission and asked me to serve as a class parent. Without having to think, I said yes. Shortly after my discharge from the NYU hospital, I felt as if I were a returning soldier who lost his limb in the war. But in the miracle of being alive made me aware of how precious life was. I was gradually becoming more confident getting around the city in my electrical wheelchair, and after Barnard, I felt like I was ready for the next step, just as Maya was. I felt encouraged and validated in Leslie's warm presence. I was still quite limited physically and learning to adapt, but she saw through my vulnerability and gently gave me back the confidence I needed. Who wouldn't be drawn to people who treat us this way? I was deeply touched. At Family School West, students were engaged in a wide-ranging and stimulating curriculum, including foreign languages, songs, violin lessons, and cooking. Leslie gave me permission to exercise my free spirit as a class parent and independent woman. That is how I interpreted and made coherent sense of her warm gestures, words, and expressions. One activity I helped organize was flower arrangement. How illuminating it is to expose pre-kindergarten children to flower arrangement. Although the two formed unlikely combination in my initially limited mind, watching both together, the wondrous eyes of the children and colorful petals of the flower drove me to creative action. I knew a little bit of akibana, the Japanese art of flower arranging, but one day the idea of recycling unsold, expired, but still beautiful flowers entered my mind. Within the radius of a few blocks from Family School West, there were four stores selling fresh flowers. I went to each one and pitched my idea, and one of them said yes. My weekly pickup of a huge bucket full of flowers and its delivery to Family School West began that day and continued for the rest of the school year. I soon realized that I had become a bit of a scene of the street in the middle of Manhattan. A huge bucket full of flowers resting on my lap as I pushed through foot traffic on a motorized wheelchair. It was not only heavy and hard to balance on my lap, but also tall, blocking my frontal view, so I had to tilt my head 90 degrees to drive. I was fearless, reckless, fast, and joyful. I must have looked comical, but I was frequently showered with warm cheers and encouragement on the street. I often stopped and chatted with strangers and was touched by their kindness. Passers-by were metaphorically and figuratively stopping to smell the roses, and so did I. I was aware of my surging sense of freedom, of being alive every day. And of course, the surprise and curious faces of children every time I entered the classroom with my colorful cargo were priceless. Family school teachers were always grateful for and creative with my quote-unquote catch of the day. Once in December, I brought a bunch of bare tree branches, all that was available, wondering if they were usable. The moment I saw the branches, which looked as if I had collected them from a wild winter forest, teacher broke into big smiles. We can use this for learning about seasons. The ladies at the flower store became familiar faces. At the end of the semester, we gave them a certificate of appreciation that students made and some potpourri and small bouquet of dried flowers that they had created from the donated flowers, which made them tear up. One day, a young woman I knew before my diagnosis told me, out of curiosity and good intentions, that she would be frightened to travel outside on her own if she were wheelchair-bound, and that I was very brave. I smiled and replied, I used to think that way too. At that moment, I realized how much I had changed my sense of self. I no longer felt that able-bodied people were invested with superior sense of self. I thought I had witnessed my entire neighborhood became one living organism. Local cafe staff on my commute up 9th Avenue started exchanging morning smiles and afternoon waves with me every time I zipped past them, even on the days I wasn't delivering flowers. People were giving me a big thumbs up, saluting my park ranger hat and leather boots, which I wore every day, even during the summer. Love your boots, they sometimes shouted. Thanks. In Hell's Kitchen, I was stopped by strangers 8 or 9 times a day on average. They would ask me if I needed any help, even I was simply waiting for a traffic light to change. Everyone became my peer. All my interactions with my community brought me a sense of safety, trust, and inclusion. The compassion of Leslie and other friends and strangers their simple act of kindness was key to building a new community. But they also changed the way I saw myself in a wheelchair and how I understood my new identity. They help provide a sense of freedom from my previously held stigma about disability. I was affirmed, nourished, and liberated, and community forming around me also changed. We were all transformed. My neighborhood was somehow becoming an extension of myself. I think of Leslie as a kind of a universal role model. She was carefully observant, stood strong among friends and colleagues, and brought me in to be nurtured. Slowly, I began, quote unquote, standing with them too. Leslie reminded me of one of the most beautiful Japanese expressions, yorisou, to snuggle up with someone or stay close. But it carried more than a physical sense, implying acting together in solidarity, connecting with people's lives and hearts, coexisting harmoniously. It is about symbiosis, understanding, empathy, and our community grew because of this. If I ever encountered conflict again, I would remember to flex my yorisou muscles. Thank you for listening. I'd like to add a little bit of a story which was not included in the story in the end. With regard to the Japanese concept yorisou, I vividly recall the wide-ranging reaction of my friends when they saw me first in my wheelchair when I got into wheelchair when I was 40. Following my discharge from the hospital, I was homebound for initial 3 months or so, receiving many visitors throughout. Many of my Japanese friends refrained from staring at my wheelchair or compression socks and avoided direct inquiry. They treated me as if nothing had changed. On the other hand, my Israeli friends immediately expressed their concern in a compassionate manner, asking, "What happened to your legs? Can you move or feel?" Surprisingly, I found myself appreciating both approaches, the practical empathy of my Israeli friends, which wasn't rude, and the Japanese quarter respect and honor, which wasn't indifference, but rather yorisou, the deeply felt sense of connection. And through this experience, I come to realize that the importance of cultivating insight and understanding the full spectrum of human responses. Okay, so I would like to stop here and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Keiko, thank you so very much for sharing such a richly described and thoughtful piece of writing with us. I thought it was really inspiring to hear the degree of care and attention to others and community that was weaved into your very personal piece of writing. Thank you. It was so lovely to hear. I noticed in their chat, we have a comment that says, "Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights through your memoir. It's a must read indeed." And now at this point, I would love to share with all of those who are here today, if you're interested in reading those pieces, you are able to place your hold at your local library. In the chat, you'll notice that those items have been posted. We also at the Vancouver Public Library have all sorts of resources to support your reading and to help to guide you in reading. So we've got 4 different book lists that are really quite fantastic. Andrew, I believe, is going to share the links to that in the chat so you can go and explore these book lists yourself. They're regularly updated and monitored by our staff here at the library. Or if you see a book, or if you feel like we're missing a book, feel free to reach out to us at the library, and we're happy to add new things to the collection. At this point, was there any questions or oh, we do have a couple of questions for Camille. I've got some questions for Dr. Honda. So Andrew, if you want to remove the book list slide at the moment, and I will take away my picture. So the first question for Dr. Honda is how being a mother of a little one, for example, having your heart beat outside your body, helped you summon the superpower you needed to overcome the challenges and accessibility barriers you faced after your drastic life change. So I think that's a question for you just about the value of being a mother. And I'm just gonna unmute you.
Sorry. Okay.
There we go.
I can't imagine that if I'm not being a mother, how I overcome these challenges, to be honest. I really did not have time to no time to breathe, and I had to back on the track ASAP. So yeah, being a mother serves tremendous source of strengths, inspirations, and hope. So I think, yeah, I'm really owed to my daughter. Yes, thank you. I don't know if this is the answer to these questions, but yeah.
That's great, Keiko. We have another question for you about how much the Japanese virtues of conducting life helped you through your journey in reconnecting with life and through the community.
That's a great question. I found myself quite surprised how deeply I found myself immersed in Japanese culture, the mindset within ingrained in. Even after living abroad for over 30 years now, it is clear that my connection to Japanese roots remained inseparable from the way I think and behave. Although I wouldn't describe myself as a particularly patriotic, I'm more like a cosmopolitan. Living abroad truly heightened my awareness of my Japanese identity. Ironically, by leaving Japan and its constraint, I found myself drawn back to a deeper relationship with my homeland. And it wasn't physical return, but rather a reconnection with my Japanese identity and significance as a writer. So yes, I incorporated the my Japanese sort of cultural roots weave into my stories. This is really through writing, it comes up quite a bit. So I hope reader will enjoy where my thinking and behavior, how that links to my roots. So, yeah.
Thank you for that thoughtful answer. Panelists, I don't see any further questions in the chat, so you can feel free to sign out whenever you'd like. But thank you again for joining us. It's just been such a pleasure working with you in this program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.